Everyone, and welcome back to the Business of Business podcast, Two Daughters and Their Dad. I'm your host, Staci J. Dempsey, and like always, I have the one and only Dad. Good morning, good afternoon to you, Dad. How are you?
I'm doing well. Hello, everyone.
And unfortunately, we do not have the other daughter, one of the other daughters today, because my fantastic sister Jennifer is still on maternity leave and being in her mommy role. So, as much as we miss her on the podcast, she is literally keeping humans alive. So, I don't think we can be too upset that she is not able to carve out this time to be with us today. But I know that she's really looking forward to being back, especially coming back because we're into season 7. How about it? How about it?
Great.
Round of applause to our listeners, to our viewers, for those that have just, plugged in there with us. Shout out to our producer, Janet, who literally makes everything you guys see come to fruition. She takes our ideas and like gets them actually out into the world. So shout out to our producer, Janet. And shout out to all of our viewers and listeners for just plugging along. We hope that all of this information at some point has been helpful and valuable. But here we are. We're going to roll into season 7. And, something that Dad and I were talking about that we feel like, especially as a new entrepreneur, is, the many hats that we have to wear when we start our business, when we're in our business. And the two of those hats is being an entrepreneur and then being a manager. And what do those roles look like and how do they differ? And how maybe at some point can we decipher when we really have to be in the manager role and when we really just truly have to be in the entrepreneurial role. And so certainly Dad has worn many a hats outside of being dad hat, being worn many hats in 40 years of being in the insurance industry. So, Dad, why don't you maybe start us off a little bit with someone that's new looking to start their business and they think maybe I've been a manager in a prior career, in a current career, and I'm used to working with people. I'm used to getting things done. And how could that be different, being an entrepreneurial and getting it done?
Well, I think the first thing to understand is when you there's big differences between a leader and a manager, and so first of all, really learning what those differences are, because I think if and I didn't see any statistics on this, so I could be all wrong, but my gut tells me that out of the two different traits, leadership or manager, probably most people have to learn to be a leader more so than a manager. Manage because, we manage our day to day lives. We're into the details of our own lives. And so, we can kind of just transfer that into an entrepreneur situation where we're, taking care of, the day to day and making sure everything's running smoothly and, all the components of running our business. But leadership is a different skill set. And so, you know, I guess there might be some natural born leaders out there, but I think for the most part, that's um, you know, a learned mindset. So just wanted to kind of get that out front. And so, but yes, I mean, starting out in your business, you're probably going to have more of that manager role because, you're running the business. You're making sure, you know, people are at work on time. You're making sure the doors are open. You're making sure the heat's on, the air conditioning's on, the lights are on. You're making sure that you have inventory. You're making sure that payroll gets met. There's all these different things that you're going to be dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And so, but there's going to be those moments, even then, that you're going to have to become, show more leadership. When it comes to facing a sudden challenge or facing, a problem that, wasn't, that's coming that you weren't expecting, yes, there's going to be a tactical way to approach that. But if you have a team of people or, employees, you got to bring them all along, so that's where the leadership comes in. But, early on, I know in our business, I probably played a much stronger manager role than a leader role. And then, grew into more of the leadership role.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and what honestly, what kind of comes to mind when you share that, those distinctions is that, take Jennifer's situation, right? Her vision was the way I'm running my business. I see the changes. I see things on the horizon. I see things in my business I don't really like. How do I change it? So now she changed her whole business model, right? To the stylists, they have their book of business. They book their clients. They work the hours they want to work or set, they set their own price. Like she gave up, she changed the vision of her salon. But guess what? On Saturday, she still had to go in and do payroll and make sure things were stocked up. She was managing, getting those things done. And so Jennifer comes to mind that here she had this vision for her salon and had to share that vision with everyone. But the tasks that you shared, still, you know, having to make the decisions kind of on the base on a daily basis, is still there. So, so how could, um, you know, how could people maybe when they're looking at building out their business, or even looking at what kind of help they know they're going to need for their business, how could people maybe distinct when they need to be in, managing it rather than, leading it?
yeah, I think the first thing is, maybe let's talk, just briefly on what the differences are. I mean, certainly leader, you're going to be more of, you're going to be the face of the business, not only to your team, but out to the public. You're going to be the one that's establishing the vision, and, even the strategy on how to, get to that, to that place, with your vision. And, and really kind of establishing culture for your business.
Right. Right.
So those are all leadership roles, where on the manager roles, they're the one that's going to be into the day to day, the grind of, doing all these things, making sure that employees are there, making sure that, that, the production line is working, making sure that, again, the lights are on, the technology's working, and, just those kind of things. And, so as an entrepreneur, as someone who's early on in their business that has to carry both of those hats, you have to really learn, like, all right, well, you know, technology's not working and we're not going to function without technology. So who am I
Right.
calling? How do I fix that? Those, that type of thing. Um, and you just got to get involved and help get that done. Where if there's a situation where you see an opportunity for your business, to expand or grow or take care of a need, then that's going to be okay. First of all, I need to cast that vision because that's going to change things, in the business to some extent, because we're going to be going down this road in addition to these other things we're doing. And so, now you've got to cast a vision and create the why. Why are we doing this? What? And and then sit down with your management team or manager, or or, well, you wouldn't have one at this point, just your team, and say, okay, here, that's the vision. Now here's how we're going to get there. Here's what we need to do every day. Here's the system that needs to be implemented, and be open to feedback. Be open to your team to say, okay, what do you think? Am I building? Is this the right things for us to be doing, or am I missing
Right.
something, or or are we overdoing it? Whatever it may be. So
Yeah.
moving in and out of that role is takes practice, takes experience. So, so again, I would say if you're going to spend any time uh, new in the business on self development, it would be in the leadership role. Absorbing as much. There's a ton of material out there on leadership. So that's where I would suggest you spend your time because that's probably the skill set you're going to need to develop.
Yeah. And so, yeah, you lead me into my next, my next um, thought is that, now, for example, Dempsey Weiss, um, when, or say, let's just say a listener or a viewer, here they are, they now have people in their business. How do they now maybe release some of that managing, and able to really be in more of the leadership? And what would those, and you kind of already touched on it a little bit, those that would manage, what would that look like? What would that be like, me handing that off to someone or entrusting them with that so that I could be more in my leadership mindset?
Well, that's a great question because that's the other tricky part, right? I mean, is um, okay, now I'm in the position not to have to do that, but I have to have, the fortitude to be able to now hand the details off and not try to hang on to them in some way, not still be tethered to them. And that's where, goes back to the old saying, if you want a job done, you're just better off doing it yourself. Well, that is a trap you can fall into, when you're, transitioning from a dual role to just the leadership role, that you're still going to want to be in the details. You've just grown so accustomed to being in the details, it feels strange and awkward, to be entrusting that. So I think the best way to do it is hopefully you're developing someone on your team to be that person. And, so whether it's training and, again, just, and then start to, you know, do it over time, rather than saying, okay, we have, we have enough business now for me to hire a manager or to bring a management person on. And then you go out and hire that person and, that could work. You could hire a very good person and, they can come in and do that role. But I think a lot of times now you're having to do a lot of training, even though they might have a management background. And so, if you can start to develop someone on your team that's been working with you, they show management skills, and then you can start to hand things over, you know, little by little, so to speak, or, you don't have to, bite the whole thing off and just say, okay, here's some things that, I'm giving you responsibility for. And then, see how they do, try to stay hands off and then let them start to develop to where next thing you know, you wake up and they're handling all the management day-to-day stuff for you. And you're not having to, you know, kind of walk behind them and check their work, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, and before we hit record, Dad, you said something great that I feel like it's, when you are able to have those that can manage inside of your business, you had said, the leader steers the ship, um, but the managers can make sure that everybody's moving in the right direction. And the other benefit in my experience is that, those that are able to manage things in your business for you, they typically know how to get it done better, faster, smarter, and more efficient than you would, because they've done it now a couple of times. They have some confidence, and quite frankly, uh, probably you get a better outcome than trying to continue to insert yourself. Because I've certainly done that in my nonprofit life where I've said, I trust you, you got this, run with it. And then it's, well, what about A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z? And I just convolute things and I should have just, you know what? you are already steering us in the right direction after we all agreed on what we think the vision and the mission is. And so I think that can be a real benefit that once you get to that point to say, have people that can kind of take the ball and run with it is good all the way around.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and that's right. And you know, and that just again, you have to be willing to change yourself, to really, um, to be able to do that. And again, I can still even now, start to think, I wonder, what I wonder whatever happened, or how did that turn out, and that type of thing. Even though I haven't heard that it didn't turn out well, and so next thing I know, I'm, checking in and hey, what's going on with this, and oh, that was resolved a long time ago, So I can still have a tendency to fall into, that task role, management role, rather than just trust the process, trust the team, right?
that's
And
right.
the other thing that when you were talking about that, Stacy, was, you know, and we've heard a lot of it, the classic um, one of the classic leadership books out there, Good to Great, talks about servant leadership, and that the most effective, successful businesses are ones where the leaders, look to serve their team, not their
Right.
team serve the leader. And so, that's, I think, something that when you start to develop, more of your leadership style, if you can just remember that, um, that one of your primary roles is to serve your team, and your management team, and put their needs ahead of your own. First of all, that establishes a pretty, you know, a pretty good culture for your business.
Yeah.
But secondly, it gives it gives especially your management team the confidence that, hey, you know, Stacy has my back, Jack has my back. I mean, they're confident that you know, they're not being watched, to try and find them make a mistake, right, and catch in a, you know, in a mistake. They're there to say, how can I serve you? What can I do to make your role more effective? What can I do to give you more work-life balance? Maybe because of that management role, they're burning the candle at both ends. They're in before everybody and leave after everybody, and so depending on what that looks like, that might be okay or it might be unhealthy. So just making sure you're paying attention and saying, okay, as a leader, how can I be serving, my team, especially my managers or manager.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Dan. Um, so, I think certainly leadership, and I want to point out, I think the nugget alert on this episode should definitely be, if you're going to look at personal development, look first at leadership mindset. And like Dad said, there's a plethora of free available things and content for all of that. Um, but to kind of wrap it up a little bit, what do you think about Dad hiring? Can you hire a visionary and hire a manager into your business?
Um, I think that would be, you mean two separate roles, or someone that can, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a great question. I think that, as the entrepreneur, as the founder of the business, I really think out of the two roles, visionary, leader, and manager, you should have more of that leadership role, that visionary role, because it's your business. You're the one that's, made the investment. You're the one that's,
Yeah.
had the dream, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I think that, to hire someone to, be that person for you, I don't know. I mean, I would think that it might work in occasional situations, but I don't think I would want someone to be my visionary. I want to be my own visionary. I want to, take,
Mhm.
what I feel is, the direction. Now, again, I'm not saying I don't want input or, I'm
Or
drawing the line,
mentorship, or yeah, right.
I'm drawing the line in the sand, but, so, but I think that that would be a tougher role to hire into than saying, okay, now I'm developing, my management team, hiring a manager, that, that type of role. And I know when, eventually, when we hired that manager of the office, it not only just uh, changed how I do business day to day, but it really allowed our business to go to the next level in a growth perspective. Because now I could truly focus on what I do best. And
Right.
so, I mean, we didn't touch on that, but you know, the business growth that your business can uh, achieve by you being more of the leader and less of the management, you know, is worth the risk of hiring someone or developing someone. I heard, I think it was John Maxwell say one time, you know, he hears people, well, if I train them to do this and do that, and then they're just going to leave me, they'll go find another job, and he said, well, what's the alternative? You don't train them, you don't develop them, and you keep them, so that that's not going to fly either. So,
Yeah.
again, just making sure that, um, you're investing in people, and and even though it might be scary from a financial investment standpoint, in most cases you're going to see your business grow pretty significantly because now you're operating more in your sweet spot.
Yeah. Well, Dad, I think that for this episode, we should challenge our viewers and our listeners to this upcoming week. Just etch out 1 hour of what you would label as your leadership time, and then one additional hour for your managing time. And think about your processes, think about how, the people that you have involved. What are things that you can delegate? Okay, listen, let me tell you something. Jack Dempsey is the master delegator, and we love that. Appreciate that. um and I'm sure we've shared many a stories, but I won't do that today. But taking 1 hour to just what can I do? Maybe that's doing 1 hour of or professional development for leadership mindset. Maybe that is, what does my strategic plan look like this upcoming year? Because hey, we are knocking on the door, everybody, of a new year. So let's just take 1 hour our leadership, and then 1 hour for management time. And we'd love to hear what you guys come up with. We'd love to hear your feedback, and how maybe it's been helpful to you. So
And if you're out there looking for resource on leadership, probably in my estimation, the one person that's probably the foremost thought leader in leadership and has just a ton of content out there is John Maxwell.
yeah,
So, I mean, he's written so many books. I mean, he's still out there active. He's been doing it for decades. He's still out there, helping people with his seminars and different things. So, just maybe, if you haven't heard of him, Google him. You'll see he's got all kinds of books and resources that you can tap into that well, I think will really benefit in your leadership development.
yeah. I concur. I concur. Well, to everyone that's tuning in with us, we want to thank you guys so much. Thank you so much for just all 6 seasons. Thank you for being here for season 7. And we're super fired up. We hope that you guys have found this episode to be helpful. And we hope that you are kind to yourselves and kind to each other. And we'll see you all in our next episode. Bye bye.